And then do you just need a reminder to spotlight me or you have
I
that?
should remember.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm. Good morning, everybody.
Looks like we got about 9 more people or so to join.
How many typically join?
Just depends. Usually, don't you think, Nancy, between like 20 and 40?
Around 20 has
Around
been a good.
20? Oh, okay. We're at 16 now. We'll wait a couple more minutes. Hang on, guys. A couple more people are coming in, it looks like.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you all for joining us.
We have some outsiders on there.
All are welcome.
All right, Marla, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started.
All right, give me a second and I'll share my screen. One second. Right.
All right, welcome everybody to our first Lunch and Learn of 2024, Building Connections in the Workplace with Effective Communication. My name is Nancy Seidel, and I also have with us Marla Klein from the Employment Collaborative of Cuyahoga County. I'm going to do a couple of housekeeping things at the top, and then we'll get into our introductions. If you are able to turn on your camera, that would be great. We'd really love that. However, if you can't, that's okay. But also make sure that you are muted currently, and there may be some opportunities during the presentation where our presenter will ask you a question and you will be able to unmute. When a question is asked, if you have an answer, please go to the reactions and use the raise hand icon, and Marilee will call on you to answer the question. If you are able to now, go ahead and put your name and email in the chat. And any questions that you have that you want answered by the end of the presentation, please feel free to also put those in the chat. Like I said, my name is Nancy Seidel. I'm with the Employment Collaborative of Cuyahoga County. I serve on the governing board for service delivery. And what we like to do with service delivery is help with training elements for all of our provider agencies under the Employment Collaborative. The Employment Collaborative of Cuyahoga County was started in 2014 as a 501c3, a nonprofit that collaborates with over 60 nonprofit agencies, social service agencies, government agencies, and it's dedicated to helping businesses access local, qualified job seekers to meet their staffing needs. We host hiring events and educational events and trainings to businesses throughout Cuyahoga County. These events educate businesses on the benefits of hiring individuals with disabilities, as well as giving them direct access to qualified candidates who can fill open positions within their company. The Employment Collaborative of Cuyahoga County has helped over 1,000 hires in the history of the service deliveries that we've been doing. Today, the service delivery team consists of myself and Marla Klein. Typically, we also have Bob Rosante, who is not available to be with us today, and Melissa Elias, who's not available to be with us today. So Marla, thank you for pinch hitting for us. I'd like to introduce to you our presenter today. Marilee Finney is our presenter, and Marilee is a certified speech and language pathologist from Cleveland, Ohio. She runs her own private practice, and she's also, and that practice is called MLF, speech therapy. She has been a professional speaker for over 24 years. She speaks to corporations and other organizations on effective communication, public speaking, and overcoming in leadership and life. Marilee is also a professor and teaches public speaking courses at Lakeland Community College. As a child who stuttered, Marilee could not imagine being a speaker or a speech and language pathologist. In her presentation, she shares a message of discovering an overcomer attitude and being able to do things you never thought you were able to do. And there at the bottom of this screen, you can see there's a website with her direct information. You'll all be getting a copy of this as part of our follow-up. Today's presentation is called Effective Communication in the Workplace, and this communication is key to the success in the workplace. We have a desire to communicate better, but sometimes we're missing the missing piece, which is know-how. In this presentation, you'll get the know-how to listen without an agenda, express your ideas in a clear and concise format, and manage communication breakdowns. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Marilee Finney.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm just going to take a brief moment to get situated here. So I am having a little technical difficulties. I can't get to my slideshow. I can't, because the button says this meeting is being recorded. I can't press slideshow.
Shirley, do you want me to just go back to sharing mine? I know that wasn't ideal, but
Sure, it's just covering it.
Marilee, you should be able to move that button probably, or you can access the slideshow button from the bottom right of PowerPoint.
The bottom right.
Yeah, there's also yep.
Okay. Oh, did I do it?
you did
There you
it.
go.
All right, I'm all about overcoming, and look, we're doing it right at the beginning and we practiced. Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. The one thing that I always like to say at the beginning, although it was said in the bio, but I like to say a few things about it. So I do stutter. So from time to time, it may look a little bit different, sound a little bit different, but hold on. I have some great ideas to share, and I'm really excited to be able to be here and share this with you today. I think we can just jump into things. The only thing that I just wanted to add to the bio is, so I have been doing this for a long time. I have been blessed with so many opportunities, and I just absolutely love what I do. I have had the opportunities to do workshops, keynotes, trainings, all kinds of things. And so know that you're not guinea pigs, so you'll be okay. All will be well today. But I just feel incredibly blessed to have the opportunities and to be able to share a topic that is so close to my heart today. If you have questions during it, you can certainly feel free to put them in the chat. I will have times where we will stop and I'm gonna go to big screen and I will ask for some interaction. Please, you only have to volunteer. I don't call on people. Just do with what you're comfortable with. But I would love to have some interaction because it's so boring just to hear a speaker. I know. Okay, so let me go ahead and get started. So this is just my contact information. Just a couple notes about my PowerPoint slides and where I got my images. And you did receive a one-pager handout. And then you will receive a feedback form. And if you could be so kind to be able to fill that out and scan that back to me in email. I did put my email in the chat and I also have it on the form that will be sent tomorrow. So if you could look out for that form, that would be wonderful. I did also ask if you could put your name and your email in the chat. So just I have that information. I did put mine as well. All right, so let's do it. Let's get started. So I want to tell you a little bit about my own story and what kind of brings me here today. So I grew up as a kid who stuttered. That was probably me in the first or second grade. And I had a lot of therapy and I felt so inadequate because I wasn't fluent. And so there was this thought that you had to be fluent in order to communicate. But despite all this, I loved words. I loved talking to the point that my mom would say, "Can you please stop talking?" And so I was just so excited about communicating and talking at home where I was comfortable. I don't want to give you the idea that at school and other places that I was freely communicating because I wasn't because of stuttering. But I fell in love with this process of communication, even though it was difficult. But it wasn't always easy, for sure. There were bumps, there were roadblocks for sure. So let me take you back to the seventh grade. It was the seventh grade, and I was in the choir at church, and I was given the opportunity to sing in the choir, which was really exciting. But I wanted to do what my friends were doing, sing at the lectern. When I asked the choir director if I could do that, he said, "No, because you stutter." Well, even in the seventh grade, I knew that I didn't stutter when I sang. And so I was so offended by this. So I went home, told my mother, and my mother said, "We're going to get the speech pathologist involved in school and, be able to see what's going on here." So the speech pathologist wrote a letter. And my mother made me take that letter to choir practice. And she did not talk to the director, but she made me do it. And so I did. Nothing changed, but so much changed. So I still didn't get to sing to the lectern. And it's probably not because of stuttering, but probably because of my voice. But at the time, I was just so offended that something was going to stop me. But so nothing changed, but so much changed. I learned how to advocate. I learned the importance of communication and not to sit back. And my mother taught me that lesson. And it stuck with me for so long and carried me throughout my life. And so in my story, I had to develop this overcomer mindset. And so as we talk today, and you think about the challenges of building connections and effective communication, you might too have to draw on an overcomer mindset to be able to overcome some of these challenges. Sometimes they appear so big, but when we take a step back and we're able to see the possible, guess what? The impossible becomes so possible. And so there's such power in this overcomer mindset. So I ask you today to keep this in mind as we go forward. And I talk about maybe talking to difficult people, which can be challenging. And you might think, "Oh, that's impossible." But maybe it's not. Maybe if we're able to draw on this energy of this overcomer mindset that things are possible, we can see things in a different light, in a different spirit. So For today, we're going to be talking about connection. And I had this quote from Bossy and Gilligan talking about how we create a safe and supportive atmosphere and how we can do this. When we do this, then we can create connection. I think why connection is so important to me in communication is because as a kid who stuttered and going through speech therapy a lot, I never had that connection with the therapist. I was a mouth, a cute mouth, but a mouth. And I felt like people didn't see me for who I was. And I think that's so important that when we talk about building a connection, we have to understand the person. We have to build a relationship in order to have effective communication. All right, so I'm going to ask this question and I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. So what is the best way to build a relationship? Feel free to put it in the chat or feel free to speak up. Anything is okay. So when you think about building a connection, either if you do a lot virtually, if you do things in person, what is one way that you would say is most effective? So find a connection, okay? And feel free to unmute. That's perfectly okay to do. Okay, somebody wrote, find something out about the person. Okay, share about yourself. I love it. Find a common interest. Okay, awesome. Make a contact and listen intentionally, for sure. Okay. So great. Those are always, and there's many. It's not just limited to one, for sure. So as I said previously, when we focus on this relationship, we are able to create that safe space for others to move together and to get away from fear and judgment. And that's so very important. And going back to my own story, that was one thing that was missing. I didn't feel that relationship. So when you're in the workplace, when you're working with individuals that you serve, the importance of building that connection, and not only building that connection with them, but also with employers that you might work with, whatever connections that you need to make, making that relationship, knowing that that person is first. And so everybody chimed in a couple different ways, and there's many ways to do this. I think the number one way is through effective communication. And that's broken down into two things: listening and verbal communication. We need to be able to really understand where the person is coming from to be able to verbally communicate. And so they go so hand in hand. All right, so let's start with listening. So I got another question. Sorry. When you hear the word listen, what pops into your head? So feel free to, you can unmute, call it out, or feel free to stick something in the chat. Okay, I see. Pay attention, focus on what is being said. Okay, be quiet. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Sometimes people say difficult because they think about that it can be hard. So I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but listening, according to Buster, can be thought of as a gift. So it's something that, if we can't communicate, then we don't really listen. And so it's so part of the process of being able to understand the person's message. So sometimes we may come in with an agenda or thinking certain things, and we're not really present in the conversation. And that's hard. And so a couple tips or a couple things that you could do is being able to listen to the message that the person is communicating and avoid planning what might be next for you to say. Maybe you might jot it down on a post-it note or something just so you don't forget. But being able to really be present in the moment and hear what they say so that you know how to respond. If you're listening with an agenda, then you may not be able to do that, and your mind may be going into different directions. So remember, if we don't listen, we can't really communicate, and it can result in anger and mistrust. So many times, there are times when people just don't hear the message and the message is different and they're like, I thought you said that, because maybe they weren't really able to listen or to comprehend what was going on. And so then they draw conclusions. And then it might result in anger. Then it might, and it really didn't start off that way. And so if we can basically be there and be able to listen without an agenda, great things can happen. So just want to present some of these questions. What happens if the needs of the individual and the employer are not heard? So I'm really trying to bring it to your situation and what you might be going through. And then what would be the results? So again, I'm going to invite you to feel free to stop sharing. I'm sorry, to feel free to turn off your mute and speak, or to feel free to put it in the chat. So I'll give you a minute. Okay, so people are putting resentment, frustration, disappointment. Yeah. And so all kinds of things would happen if we're not really able to hear the needs and really process the information. And so what we want to do is we want to make it a win-win for all parties. And we want to be able to really see what people want and be able to go from there. All right, so here I am to help. Some of these strategies may be very familiar to you, and that's perfectly fine, but maybe I'm giving you a new insight or a new idea on it. Either one, these are basic strategies for being able to listen. So one way we could do is we can clarify. And we can say things like, I think I hear you say, or let me see if I understand, things like that. And this information is all coming from Holland. And then another strategy is to disclose. So maybe we're working with somebody who it's their first time that they've had a job. And so we could relate to that because we've been there, done that. And so we disclose, yeah, my first job, it was scary and I didn't know what to do. And so when we can do that again, we're building that rapport. And there's such value in that. It seems like this just takes time. And maybe it could be a waste of time, but it's definitely not. Again, if we're able to build that relationship, we're able to make that connection. When we're able to make a connection, then everybody's able to understand, and the person is going to be more trustworthy of us. All right, another thing is affirming. So I'm going to give an example. It could be that you observe a coworker. It doesn't have to be just with your individuals who you serve or with an employer. It could be any situation. So you could say, this one was for an individual that you serve. So I like how you listened patiently to what the employer had said. That is definitely your strength. So again, affirming, saying what's working. Sometimes we're always sometimes we can focus on what's not working. And so when we're able to let the person know, hey, I really like that you did that, that can be very affirming. All right, and number 4, empathy. Empathy is the social intelligence. I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar all with this. It's walking in the person's shoes. So I always give this example. If somebody is sitting there and they're looking very sad, we're not going to come up to them and say, hello, how are you? How you doing today? And our spirit's going to be very uplifting and our voice is going to be very, that's not going to make a connection. But if we drop down our vocal quality and we're talking in that more sincere voice, such as, it looks like you're having a hard day. Looks like this might not be a good day. That's a way to build connection. We're adjusting our tone. We're adjusting our gestures. That's definitely going to build a connection. All right, so I have a little example here. So the first one is the individual that you serve says, this is really hard. I can't do this. I am overwhelmed. So just type in the chat. What do you think? Would it be best to do 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe all of them, maybe just 1 and 2? What do you think? Just wanted to get some discussion going. And again, feel free to unmute if you're a person like says, I don't like to write. Feel free to talk to us. I'll keep saying that throughout the talk today in the hope that somebody will. Okay, all of them, all. Okay. Okay, anybody else? For the second one, I'm going to go ahead and just give an example. So the employer says, I want somebody who can handle all the aspects of the job and can be a team player. So maybe they're saying this to the job coach or the job developer. And so what a great technique to use is just making sure that you got it. So that clarifying, it sounds like you're really interested in an employee that can handle all the aspects. So let me just verify, what aspects are you, what aspects are most important for you? So I'm also taking it a step further and getting further information, because what you might think is important might not be important to the employer. And so we have to make sure, again, to have that effective communication in order that everybody is on the same page. Okay. And again, if you have questions or if you have more comments, I don't want to cut anybody off, so feel free to throw them in the chat. So I was asked to put this in, and what I am so happy to do this is I want to just talk a minute about, what if there's challenges? What if the individuals who we serve, maybe they have limited attention, maybe they have difficulty with speech, maybe they have difficulty with understanding. And so what do we do? So one thing is, for comprehension, for sure, we can use those short sentences or those key words. Sometimes when we say a whole paragraph, it's hard. It's also difficult for people that have attention problems to be able to attend that long to hear all that. So sometimes we speak in short sentences to make it easier, or at least highlight the key points. Another way is to paraphrase. So if a person looks really confused, oh, it looks like you might be confused. Let me see if I can say that differently. And then to give options. So maybe you're presenting a job, you've talked about this job, and and you've talked about several jobs, but it's overwhelming. Maybe you may have to just give 2 options and limit it. Or if you've asked an open-ended question like, where do you want to work? And that's like too much, then can you give them options? Would you like to work at a store? Would you like to, work at a restaurant? What would be your interest? And so sometimes if people have difficulty with comprehension, if we put them in the ballpark and able to, tell them what the choices are, that can help. Also provide written cues depending on if they're able to understand written information, but sometimes doing that can help for sure. And then I would say limit the time of a conversation. Maybe having a conversation is it's good for 5 minutes, but having one and covering everything that you have to cover is too much. Or maybe they need breaks. So this slide is really geared towards the individuals that you serve. You have to know that person and know what would be most appropriate for them and most helpful. These are some general guidelines. And again, when we have that Q&A, if you have some specifics, I'm happy to answer. All right, so it looks like we've talked about listening. Now we're going to turn our attention towards the other half, that verbal communication, how we do that. So a couple things, and I'm going to be the first one to admit that I was empowered by my colleagues that I worked with this on. I did not know what CBA is, but they gave me the example. So I didn't want to appear like I knew everything because I didn't. My standard example is a more medical example, but I love that we can put this in. So incorrect vocabulary is if you're talking to an employer, they might not know. And so just saying we will conduct a CBA, or to a family member, they're not going to have a clue what that is. But if you're able to put the meaning right in the sentence, so we're going to conduct a CBA, which is a community-based assessment that helps us determine how this particular job fits this individual. That is going to lead us to effective communication because we're providing a very clear message. We're picking the right vocabulary. Okay, we also want to remember to speak briefly. And so this was a tip before, and also in any setting, if we're talking to employers, if we continue to talk on and on and on about a question, we may lose them. And so if we can speak briefly and just say a few things and then see if they have further questions, that would be helpful. Now, of course, this is different in a lecture or some other things. It's not always that we can only, speak for 30 seconds or share things. But if you're answering a question, rather than over answering it, we want to be careful just to get the key points out. That's not going to only help the individual that we serve, but that's also going to just help anybody be able to really grab what you want to say. So there has been studies done that show that 30 seconds is the magic window. So according to Newberg and Waldham, they say that it holds our attention. It causes our brain to filter out this irrelevant information, this information that we don't need. And what I love is that we express less negativity. And so that's really important. Again, just keep it in mind with general guidelines. Maybe you already do this, then that's awesome. But maybe sometimes you have the tendency to say too much. And so maybe there's a way that you can summarize that. So this one would be best. I'm going to be really honest. This one would be best done verbally. So if you're absolutely not comfortable with that, then you can definitely put it in the chat. But this is best done verbally as an exercise. how would you explain a description of a position? And you can make one up, or if you're presenting of strengths of a person. And again, I say like a fake person, not real. But how would you do that rather than maybe going on and on about the description of the job to the individual who you serve? How could you summarize that? Or if you were talking to the employer, how could you summarize the strengths of the person? So I'm wondering if we have anybody that would like to share. Don't all jump at once. I'm going to be completely overwhelmed. I'm going to check the chat. I don't see anything in the chat. Okay. So it seems like nobody wants to chime in. So I'm going to go back, but feel free if you would like. To chime in. So I'm going to go ahead and say a couple words. I'm not prepared to do this because I wanted to get a real life example, but I'm just going to say a couple guidelines of what you might want to do. So what you're going to want to do is just prepare or make some speaking notes of what would be most important. So if it's most important that the person have typing skills, then you want to mention that. If it's most important that the person be able to lift something, then you definitely want to mention that. And what I would definitely advise, if you're preparing for a meeting, if you're preparing for something where you're not giving a presentation, but maybe you're talking one-on-one to an employer and you want to make a good impression and you want to have everything in order, you definitely want to have some speaking notes. So pulling out a tablet, having something, being ready is a really good thing. Or if you don't like to do that, even just practicing it verbally. So being able to go over it in your mind or out loud verbally is a great way to prepare. And again, if you have any specific questions at the end, I'm gonna have time to answer them, and I'm happy to. If Marla or Nancy, if I'm missing anything, or if you see hands up, please let me know. Help me. Okay. All right. I want to get on the good speaker list and not on the bad one. Okay. Or I want to stay on the good one. Okay. All right. So let's talk about choosing words carefully. So look at these words. No, possible, impossible, can't, hey dude, that's epic. So whenever we're doing something, we want to choose our words carefully, because if we don't, they could have an impact on us. And so we want to think about what words we use. Obviously, for a formal setting, we're not going to be saying, hey, dude. But maybe if we're making a rapport with an individual that you serve and it's one-on-one, that might be okay. But we might not do that with an employer, okay? Of course, we would want to have that professionalism. I don't know if you knew this, but according to, again, Newberg and Waldham, and I put all my citations at the end, if something strikes your fancy and you want to go back and learn more, click on that, or you can go back to that article and you can definitely learn more. All right, so let's talk about negative words. With negative words, did you know that stress chemicals are let off? So go ahead and type in the chat. Is that something new to you? Yes or no? Stress chemicals are let off with negative words. So just put a yes or no, or Y or N. All right, so I have a few brave volunteers. Okay, so one yes, now, okay, couple coming in. Okay, kind of half and half, okay? And anxiety is increased and trust is threatened. And so we have to watch our negative words, what we say. When we say that will be impossible, most of my life, I said that to myself. That would be impossible for me to be a professional speaker. I could never do that. Well, look, I'm doing it. And I think there's such power in words. And it wasn't just like one day I decided to talk differently. I saw role models. I belonged to an organization called the National Stuttering Association that changed the way that I languaged, the way that I said things to myself. And because of that, I got different results. So there is such power in changing our words. With positive words, they can definitely have an impact. They have an impact to be able to engage in optimism and positivity and move us in a life-enhancing direction. Don't we all want to do that? So the power of positive words, sometimes we hear about it, but we really don't know that true power. I'm a little nervous because I have another exercise. And okay, so you could put this in the chat. So an individual that you serve is upset because he or she is having challenges understanding what the employer wants them to do, and they can't get it. So what would be, could you put an example of a positive word or a phrase that you'd want to say? And then could you put an example of negative words or something that you would want to avoid saying? I'm gonna be quiet for a minute and just allow you an opportunity to put some things in the chat. Okay, so a couple things. Oftentimes it's not what you're saying, but how you're saying it. Okay, validation of feelings. I don't know if this is, whoops, this might be from the other one. Your workplace allows you to be more accurate. Okay, so here we go. Positive. There's always a solution. I appreciate you and your ideas. Love that. I understand. Let me help you. The negative is, why don't you understand? Positives might be offering assistance, and negative might be, it's easy. I like that because it might be easy for you, but it's not easy for them. And so being able to validate. It's awesome that you recognize that. That's really great self-reflection. They can't know what you don't tell them. Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, all of this information is not only for you to be able to learn, but also to give back to the individuals that you serve as well. You know, to share certain things that would be most meaningful for them. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to our last section, communication breakdowns. So again, just type in the chat. Anybody ever familiar with a communication breakdown? Put a Y for yes, or just nod your head if you're sick of texting. Again, I want you to know that I'm just not the speaker speaking to you, but there is some engagement going on and there's some interaction. Okay. All right, so communication breakdown. So according to Hull, a communication breakdown can never be solved with an argument, but rather tact, diplomacy, and a sincere desire to see the other's point of view. Isn't that true? Whenever there's a breakdown, it's so hard to see the other person's point of view. And sometimes it's just because of our own emotions. Oh my gosh, it's so hard to get out of and see somebody else. when we're able to do that, then we're able to kind of let go a little bit. And again, we're able to build that connection, our whole theme that we're talking about. So you might be wondering, well, great, Mary Lee, this sounds wonderful, but tell me how to do that. And so I'm going to go ahead and share. This technique at the beginning is a technique that I have used so much in my life. Pause, listen, and think first. I've worked in multiple settings, and I've been in school IP meetings. I've been all different medical meetings, all different places. And there's so many times when something got a little hot and hairy, and I wanted to say something, or somebody said something to me that rubbed me wrong. And I paused, listened, and thought first. What came out was so much better than when I went off the top of my head. So this technique of being able to hold on a second, nobody has to react quickly, but hold on a second. And even using some of the techniques before, oh, let me see if I have this right, because that's going to give you time to decompress too. Okay. And we can do that. We could see the other person's side by saying, let me see if I have this right, and kind of going over the facts so you understand more. And again, we want to speak about what the other person desires. So I know you really want to get this job. I know you're really excited about this. We might just have a different take on it, or a different way of thinking about this, but I know you want this job. And so again, being able to show what the person really wants, or to an employer, I know that you really wanted to be able to have this person come. I know it was your sincere desire to help us. And I love that. I think we just have to work through some challenges. All right. So there may be a time where you may come in contact with a difficult person. Okay. Hopefully not, but there may be difficult people. Many times in the many positions that I have held, and with working with all kind of people, I have come in contact with difficult people. And so I'm going to share with you some strategies. These are all by Benjamin. And using that objective language. So just like you would write, it reminds me so much of like when you have to write an incident report. They always told me, be very objective, and so same thing. We want to be objective with a difficult person. Just say exactly what we're seeing. Okay. You may want to entertain the thought of using text or email. Again, I wouldn't send a long email or anything, but sometimes people may not be people who would like to communicate on the phone, and so we have to respect that. I like to communicate on the phone. I think that having a conversation is very helpful, but maybe asking them to send a brief email with a few key points of their challenges could be a way as well. And then you want to talk about what could happen. So the correct is, if I don't get these correct instructions, I may not make the deadline. So that's just an example. And again, I want you to put it in where you work and what you do. But giving the idea of talking about what could happen. If you don't get back to me about what appointment time you want, and I'm doing it from my standpoint, then I can't schedule an appointment, okay? Or there might not be any left. And so in that way, we're talking about what could result. All right, and because difficult people are difficult, we have multiple slides on this, okay? And so I'm just gonna highlight a few of my favorites and let you read the rest. So most importantly, I think you need to evaluate if you wanna be right. Do you have to be right in this situation? And also you want to validate the criticism. Thank you for sharing. Like, oh, I appreciate that. So somebody shares something that you're like, wow, I never heard of that. Oh, where'd that come from? So just saying, Thank you for sharing. So I will share this. I do this all the time. Don't tell my husband. I do this all the time when my husband will say something. Oh, thank you for sharing. But he knows my tricks, and he'll say, yeah, stop that baloney. But this whole idea of, you're not agreeing with the person, but you are validating that they said something. And so thank you for sharing this information. I'm going to go ahead and just skip to the next one and highlight an important one. Number 8, what would be a good outcome? So out of all of this, what would be a good outcome? What would be good that would happen out of this? What do you want to happen? Again, we're using that beautiful person first language and being able to get that out and being able to allow the person time to think what they want to get out of this. So go ahead and either unmute or take a minute to put in the chat what strategy that I talked about or that you read about you think would be most helpful. And then we will wrap it up. Oh, somebody put pause and listen and think first. Yes. Use objective language. Okay, great. And what I would advise you to do is to think about some of the things that were talked about today and see what got your attention the most and what would be most fitting for the work that you do. All right, just a little reminder about feedback. If you could be so kind to, they are going to send an email probably tomorrow and with a link to the recording as well. So, which is really cool. And so if you could be so kind to print that form out and fill it out and scan it back to me and send it to my email, I would so appreciate that. And then I just wanted to say also, if you're looking for a speaker for an event, I know that we have all kind of different folks. We have employers, we have job coaches, developers. So if you're ever looking for a speaker for training, I do many different ones. This was one of 4 that I do. And I also customize. And so please feel free to reach out if you would need any other information, and please go ahead and check out my website. I think I would check out my website anyways, even if you're not interested in speaking, because I have a demo reel on there. And I also have my story of how I started off in speaking. And I actually would, I'm laughing, but I would actually talk to chairs in the backyard. As a kid who stuttered, I would line up chairs, and never in a million years did I believe that I would be speaking in front of people, but I would line up these empty chairs and I would pretend that I was a speaker, and I would get goosebumps as an adult when I became a speaker thinking about that. So you might want to check that out. Okay. And then I want to go ahead and open the floor up for questions. So feel free, what's on your mind? What can I help with, or any comments? I am so ready. And again, if it's easier for you to talk it out and to just unmute, feel free. If you prefer to put in the chat. And I understand that maybe the format was putting things in the chat, and I respect that totally. As a speech pathologist, I'm all about conversation. So I come in here and kind of cause trouble.
Marley, I have a question for you. This is Kim O'Neill.
Okay, hi, Kim.
So what would be your recommendation when you get into a conversation and the individual that you're having the conversation with just wants to keep reiterating their position? What would be a strategy that someone might use?
I think that, thank you for sharing. So it seems like you had shared your information. I would love to share a little bit of mine. Do you have, is that helpful or do you need a little bit more?
Yeah, I just want, I thought, I kept waiting till the end to see, there was two pieces that I kind of linked to that because I've seen that happen and people kind of get, it's like people just kind of like shut down when that starts happening and the conversation's just kind of nil and void at that point. So I didn't know if reconvening would be helpful, because obviously if they're not listening, and that's my perception is you're not listening and you're not really interested in what I have to say because you just keep, spouting off your position in the situation. So I was just curious to see what your response would be.
And I do like your idea of taking a break. Of sometimes if the conversation is not going anywhere, maybe we need to revisit this or come back to that. So that is one idea, I mean, as well. All right, other questions?
I have a question.
Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Danielle Cote Welsh. I'm a support administrator at the County Board of DD, Cuyahoga County.
Okay,
A-
great.
And my question is, we run a lot of meetings and a lot of times people go off topic, and how do you graciously bring everybody back to the topic at hand without, interrupting them or being rude or anything like that?
How do you bring people back to the topic so people go off tangent?
Right, they start talking about anecdotes and things like that, and that's interesting. But sometimes you only have a short time that you have to discuss, whether you're working on a plan or something. And sometimes they start talking about their lives or little anecdotes and all that, and that's very sweet. But when you have a time constraint and you don't want to be rude or mean, but at the same time, it's like we need to get back on topic here. What's a good way of doing that and still making them feel,
Yeah, two things. One thing, I saw it so effective in a school where I worked. We had to have very meetings weekly. And so we had an agenda. The principal would send a time or like an agenda of exactly what was going to happen. And like we would like check it off almost. And so it kept us on task and we were there. That could be a preventative. But if it's already happened, you could say things like, it seems like you have a great story. I would love to share this after. We do really need to get going because there's so many things that we have to cover.
thank you.
Again, validating the person, and you always want to, of course, it sounds like you want to be polite, absolutely, 100%. But sometimes we have to be a little bit assertive too, to get things going, to continue so that we can finish. And you can also bring up, we really need to get done at a certain time. I know that all our time is precious. So I'd love to hear about this a little bit later. Let's continue talking about what we were talking about.
Thank you.
And thank you for talking to me. I appreciate it. I felt a little lonely before, so thank you. Other thoughts, other questions. Anything in the chat I haven't been checking? No, okay. All right. Any other concerns or any situations? Okay, I'm just going to give you a second to think, and then I'm going to do my conclusion. And I don't need to go back to slides. Okay. All right. So, feel free, if you think about a question and you have one, feel free to email me. I'm more than happy to email you back. Just want to tell you, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. I'm just going to do my conclusion and then I'll turn it back to Nancy, or Marla may have to say a few things to end this. But I want to just thank you for your time and attention. Communication and building a connection is so very important to being able to have that effective communication. So when we can think about that person first and we can build that connection, we can do great things. So in your next conversation that you're going into, think about some of the things that we talked about and pull out one or two things that you're like, yeah, I thought about that. That would be something that could be really helpful and that I'm going to do. Because sometimes we can hear all of this information, but if we don't ever apply it, then it won't be meaningful. So again, definitely a wonderful opportunity to be able to speak to you. And I also challenge you to bring that overcomer mindset to wherever you're building connections. All right, Nancy, I don't know if there's anything that you have to conclude or say.
No, but thank you very much, Marilee, for being our presenter today. There's a lot of great information shared. I hope everyone felt that they got a little something out of either, learning how to listen, learning how to, communicate better verbally, or, working through with a difficult communication situation. Our next Lunch and Learn, we'll see some information coming out about that soon. That is June 20th. So we look forward to seeing as many of you as can join us then. And then also we will be sending out the survey that you can respond to, and that will go back to Marilee herself, as well as the link to the video clip, so that if you have anything that you want to rewatch, you can do that as well. It will be posted on our YouTube page for the Employment Collaborative in the near future. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
I will remain on for a couple minutes to get the chat. If you cannot close the meeting, that would be wonderful. Are you done recording?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna just grab